There is a certain moment in life, often so subtle we scarcely notice it, when the ground beneath our feet begins to tremble, not with the literal shaking of the earth, but with the unsettling realization that what we have always trusted as solid may in fact be nothing more than a thin veneer. This is the moment when belief itself begins to crack, when the comfortable stories we tell ourselves start to unravel, and we see that reality, as we know it, might not be truth at all but a careful arrangement of appearances. Schopenhauer, with his unflinching gaze and ruthless honesty, pressed his readers towards such a realization, whispering across centuries that everything we believe is, in one way or another, a fabrication. His was not the voice of a nihilist who delights in tearing down meaning, but rather of a philosopher who sought to expose the fragile scaffolding upon which we build our lives. He did not offer us despair, but an invitation to peer behind the mask. To enter into this exploration is to enter a labyrinth. At the surface, it is about questioning cultural narratives, inherited dogmas, and the ways society arranges its illusions for mass consumption. But at a deeper, more cosmic level, it is about questioning the very mechanisms of perception, the architecture of consciousness itself. If everything we believe is fabricated, then who is the we that does the believing, and what is the it that we believe in? To ask such questions is to lift a corner of the cosmic curtain, to glimpse a theater stage where both actors and audience are caught in the same play of shadows. Think of your earliest memories. They are colored by stories told to you by parents, teachers, or society, stories about who you are, where you come from, what is right and wrong, what is possible and impossible. These stories stitch together the fabric of your reality long before you had the power to question them. But the thread from which they are woven is not absolute truth, it is cultural convenience, evolutionary survival strategy, or psychological comfort. Schopenhauer's hidden message about reality is that this fabric is thin, and beneath it lies something rawer, stranger, and more difficult to bear. Reality, he argued, is not the world as we perceive it, but something deeper, something hidden by the veils of representation. We are caught in appearances, mistaking them for essence, and it is in this mistake that the great fabrication resides. To illustrate this, one might imagine a grand cathedral filled with stained glass windows. The light shining through them casts brilliant colors across the stone floor, reds, blues, and golds, dancing and alive. It is natural to gaze at these luminous patterns and believe they are the source of light itself, but in truth they are only the play of filtered sunlight. The reality, the pure, uncolored light, remains hidden behind the glass, invisible to those transfixed by the beauty of the projections. Schopenhauer's philosophy was an attempt to point beyond the stained glass to the blinding radiance of the source. But he knew how reluctant we are to turn away from the comforting patterns. The assertion that everything you believe is a fabrication is not meant to collapse you into despair but to awaken you to the extraordinary possibility that truth exists beyond the prison walls of belief. It is a call to courage, to dismantle the illusions piece by piece, even though the process may leave you vulnerable and naked before the mystery. For to see through fabrication is not to find nothingness, but to discover a deeper authenticity that cannot be framed by the categories of ordinary thought. Schopenhauer was insistent that what lies beneath belief is not void, but will, an elemental, blind, striving force that animates all existence. Whether one agrees with his metaphysical conclusions or not, the courage of his insight still burns. The world of belief is not reality, it is a veil. We might imagine the world as a vast stage production, with every actor wearing a mask. Generations have performed this play, passing down the masks as heirlooms, convincing themselves that the masks are their true faces. The scripts have been memorized, the roles rehearsed so thoroughly that the players forget there ever was a time before the stage. When someone dares to rip off their mask, to step out of character, the others recoil, accuse them of madness, of betrayal. Yet it is in that dangerous gesture that the possibility of truth appears. Schopenhauer's message is akin to that gesture. He reminds us that the masks are not real, the roles are not essence, and that the stage itself is not the whole of existence. At the heart of this introduction, then, lies an invitation. Not to reject all beliefs in a fit of nihilism, but to recognize their nature as fabrications. Beliefs are tools, they are provisional maps that help us navigate the terrain of existence. But when we mistake the map for the territory, the finger for the moon, the mask for the face, we entrap ourselves in a cage of our own making. Schopenhauer's hidden message is a summons to stop worshipping the map and to start exploring the vast, unmapped terrain of truth that waits beyond. As we journey deeper into this exploration, we will uncover the core themes of Schopenhauer's thought and how they resonate with the recognition that our reality is a tapestry of fabrications. We will weave together reflections on perception, representation, will, and the human tendency to cling to illusions. But before we proceed, let us pause and acknowledge the gravity of the path we are stepping onto, a path where comfort gives way to clarity, where illusion dissolves into a rawer vision of truth, and where the world you thought you knew is revealed to be far more mysterious than you ever imagined. When we step fully into Schopenhauer's vision, we are confronted by a paradox. The world that feels so familiar, so solid under our hands and feet, is in fact nothing more than an elaborate representation. What we take to be the real is only the way reality appears to us, never the thing in itself. This is the first and most unsettling theme of his philosophy, one that shakes us out of our ordinary trust in perception. He drew from Kant's insight that the mind imposes its own structures upon the raw material of experience, but he carried the thought further, declaring that the entire phenomenal world, the entirety of what we believe and see, is woven out of the loom of our perception. Thus, reality as we live it is already fabrication, not in the sense of being false, but in the sense of being manufactured by the apparatus of consciousness itself. Think for a moment of the dream. While asleep, the dream feels real, immersive, detailed. You act within it without doubt, yet upon waking you see it was only a fabrication of the mind. Schopenhauer suggested that waking life is not so different, except that the dream we call reality is held together by a deeper continuity and bound by collective agreement. This is one of his most provocative notions, that our waking life is, in its own way, another dream. A dream not confined to the night, but stretching through every hour of the day, a dream where belief is the glue that binds us to its coherence. Another central theme is the distinction between the world as representation and the world as will. Representation is the domain of appearances, the theater of forms and images. Will, however, is the raw, blind energy that animates everything, from the sprouting of a seed to the yearning of the human heart. To Schopenhauer, this will is the hidden engine of reality, indifferent to our beliefs, indifferent even to our illusions of meaning. Everything you believe, he would insist, is a fabrication layered upon this primal, restless force. If representation is the stained glass, will is the uncolored light behind it, fierce and inexhaustible. The implications are profound. What we cling to as truth, the narratives of history, the doctrines of religion, the ideals of progress, may all be shimmering veils covering the deeper, darker undercurrent of will. This does not render them useless, but it does render them provisional, fragile. For Schopenhauer, to see the world rightly is to recognize that these veils are not the ultimate ground of being, but fleeting reflections cast upon it. When one realizes this, the ordinary compulsions of life begin to loosen. We see ambition, power, wealth, even love, not as ultimate truths, but as expressions of the will striving endlessly, pulling us into cycles of desire and suffering. This leads us to another theme, illusion as both prison and protection. On one hand, the fabrications we live by bind us, chaining us to suffering, for they trick us into believing the satisfaction of desire will bring lasting fulfillment. On the other hand, they shield us from the raw, unbearable truth of the will's blind striving. The illusions are thus double-edged, both the cause of our bondage and the cushion that softens our fall into despair. Schopenhauer, with his relentless honesty, refused to look away from this paradox. He saw human life as caught between the need for illusion and the yearning for truth, forever suspended between comfort and clarity. But his hidden message is not one of futility. Rather, he invites us to see through the fabrication without collapsing into despair. If the world of belief is indeed a construction, then freedom lies in recognizing it as such. We cannot escape the will, nor can we dissolve completely the structures of representation. Yet by lifting the veil, by daring to admit the fabricated nature of belief, we gain a new vantage point, a way of walking through the world with eyes wide open. It is here that Schopenhauer's message transcends its apparent pessimism and becomes strangely liberating. To know that belief is fabrication is to cease clinging to it as ultimate truth. It is to dance within the play of appearances without mistaking the play for reality. Consider the metaphor of the puppet theater. The puppets move, speak, and interact as if alive. To the children watching, the story is absorbing, real, filled with drama and meaning. But an adult who peers behind the curtain sees the strings, the hidden hands guiding the figures. Schopenhauer's philosophy is akin to peering behind the curtain. It does not destroy the play, one can still enjoy the story, but it prevents us from being deceived into believing the puppets live on their own. In this way, his insight gives us both detachment and compassion. Detachment, because we no longer cling so desperately to illusions; compassion, because we see that everyone around us is likewise caught in the dream of representation, driven by the same restless will. At the heart of these themes is a radical humility. To say that everything you believe is a fabrication is not to condemn belief, but to remind us that belief is not the same as truth. It is to call us into a posture of questioning, of openness, of wonder. It is to invite us into a vision of reality where the most ordinary moment, a leaf trembling in the wind, a glance between strangers, the rise and fall of your own breath, is no longer taken for granted, but seen as the shimmering surface of a deeper, unfathomable current. Schopenhauer's hidden message about reality is that the world you see is not the world that is. This realization, though disorienting, is the beginning of wisdom. For only when you know that you live in a hall of mirrors can you begin to seek the source of light that makes the reflections possible. Only when you admit the fabrications can you stand at the threshold of what is real. Imagine, for a moment, a traveler wandering through a vast cathedral. The structure is breathtaking, with soaring arches, radiant stained glass, and frescoes alive with color. The traveler marvels, believing every stone to be a testament to eternal truth. But as he lingers, he notices faint cracks in the walls, hidden scaffolding behind the facades, and painted illusions where no depth exists. The cathedral, magnificent though it is, turns out to be a crafted illusion, a structure of faith and artistry rather than the eternal fortress he assumed. This is how Schopenhauer asks us to see reality itself, not as an immovable sanctuary, but as a grand architecture of fabrication, dazzling yet constructed. The beauty of the cathedral does not vanish when one realizes its artifice. Instead, it becomes a reminder that appearances are masks laid carefully over what is raw and unseen. To render this insight more vividly, consider the tale of a painter who becomes trapped inside his own masterpiece. He has painted a village with rolling hills, rivers, and skies so convincing that he forgets the brushstrokes are his own. Walking through the painted streets, he marvels at the beauty, yet suffers from the same longings, fears, and sorrows as his painted villagers. The more real the painting feels, the more he forgets his role as its creator. Schopenhauer's allegory of the world as representation mirrors this. We are beings inside a painting, so consumed by its details that we forget it is an image conjured by our minds, never the thing in itself. Another symbolic lens is the myth of the marionette. Each person is a puppet on the stage of life, animated by strings pulled from above. We believe ourselves to be free actors, improvising our roles, yet Schopenhauer suggests that what drives us is not freedom but the blind will, that ceaseless force pulling our strings. We laugh, cry, and struggle, but the movements are orchestrated by a hidden hand. In this allegory, the fabrication is our belief in autonomy, our conviction that we direct our fate. Schopenhauer strips away that comfort, showing us that we are borne along by forces older and stronger than our fragile sense of self. Yet the awareness of the strings does not diminish the play, it makes us wiser actors, gentler toward fellow marionettes also caught in the same mysterious performance. There is also the allegory of the veil, an image borrowed from ancient mysticism and echoed in Schopenhauer's thought. Reality wears a veil woven of appearances, and what we believe, the stories we tell about justice, love, progress, and meaning, are the patterns embroidered upon it. To live without questioning is to fall in love with the embroidery, mistaking it for the fabric itself. To live with insight is to sense that beyond the veil lies something raw, unshaped, and immense, the will, indifferent to our designs. This veil protects us, for to gaze directly at the raw will is to risk despair, yet it also imprisons us, for the embroidery distracts us from recognizing the greater forces at play. Schopenhauer's hidden message is not to rip away the veil, but to approach it with reverence, to recognize it as both barrier and blessing, illusion and revelation. Another symbolic story might be drawn from the image of a mirror maze. Imagine walking through such a maze, where every reflection mimics your gestures, multiplying endlessly. Each mirrored self feels solid for an instant until you collide with glass. Beliefs are like these reflections, condensing in their immediacy, repeated so often that they seem undeniable, yet always distortions of something deeper. Schopenhauer would say that we wander endlessly in this hall of mirrors, believing one reflection after another, until the day we realize there is no final mirror that shows the thing in itself. All is representation, endlessly refracted, endlessly convincing. The discovery does not dissolve the maze, but it changes how we walk within it, for we cease chasing reflections as though they were absolute. And then there is the image of the restless ocean. On its surface, waves rise and fall, each with its own shape, its own rhythm, its own fleeting life. People believe the wave to be real in itself, to have an identity separate from the waters. But the truth, Schopenhauer insists, is that every wave is the same ocean, every crest a momentary manifestation of the one boundless will. To cling to the wave is to believe in fabrication, to mistake the transient for the eternal. To see the ocean beneath is to glimpse the hidden unity behind all appearances. Yet even with this awareness, one cannot stop the waves from rising. They surge because the ocean must surge, because the will cannot cease striving. Awareness does not still the sea, but it deepens our understanding of its nature. All these narratives, the cathedral, the painting, the puppet, the veil, the mirror maze, the ocean, circle around a single truth, that what we believe as reality is a tapestry of appearances, a dream we take for waking life. Schopenhauer does not mock us for believing, he acknowledges that illusion is necessary, even protective. But he urges us not to remain children in the theater, not to mistake the puppet for the puppeteer, nor the stained glass for the sun beyond it. To understand that everything you believe is fabrication is to be initiated into a deeper wisdom, a wisdom at once unsettling and liberating. It is one thing to speak of illusion in poetic or philosophical terms, and quite another to confront it in the fabric of our daily lives. Schopenhauer's hidden message, that everything you believe is a fabrication, is not an abstract statement meant only for the cloistered scholar or the dreamer of metaphysical puzzles. It has teeth, it reaches into the simplest and most ordinary of human experiences, reshaping how we live, how we relate, and how we suffer. If the world is woven of appearances, then our task is not to despair but to learn how to move through this tapestry with awareness, grace, and perhaps even a measure of freedom. Think first of our most basic convictions about identity. From childhood, we are told stories about who we are, our family name, our culture, our role in society. These stories become the foundation of a belief in a stable self. Yet Schopenhauer would remind us that this sense of self is a mask stitched together by memory and desire, not an indestructible core. If everything we believe is a fabrication, then even this cherished identity is only another narrative embroidered on the veil. To live with this awareness does not mean abandoning the self entirely, but holding it lightly, as a costume we wear in the great performance of life rather than an eternal essence. It frees us from clinging too tightly to roles that inevitably change and dissolve. The same insight applies to our pursuit of happiness. Most of us believe that happiness lies in acquiring more wealth, more recognition, more love, more experiences. Yet beneath these pursuits lurks the restless will that Schopenhauer described, a blind striving that can never be satisfied, for each desire fulfilled gives birth to another. The belief that happiness can be secured in possessions or status is one of the grandest fabrications of the human theater. Awareness of this illusion allows us to step back, not into ascetic renunciation necessarily, but into a wiser relationship with desire. Instead of being consumed by the chase, we can savor the momentary beauty of existence without expecting it to fill an infinite void. This is a practical form of liberation, not an escape from striving, but an easing of its grip. Consider also the realm of society and politics, where narratives of progress, justice, and truth are often proclaimed with fervor. These stories hold great power, yet Schopenhauer would caution that they, too, are fabrications, collective myths that sustain order and give people something to believe in. To recognize their illusory nature does not mean rejecting them outright, but it does mean approaching them with humility. Systems built on fabrications can uplift, but they can also deceive and oppress. By seeing through their surface, we gain the ability to participate without being entirely ensnared, to advocate for justice while knowing that every system is provisional, fragile, and subject to the distortions of human will. In relationships, the idea of fabrication reveals itself in the ways we project onto others. We believe we know who our friends, lovers, or enemies are, but what we often know is our own reflection, colored by expectation and fear. Schopenhauer reminds us that we see others not as they are in themselves, but as they appear to us through the filters of representation. This realization encourages compassion, for it shows us that misunderstandings are not failures of intention but inevitable consequences of human perception. To recognize that our view of another is a fabrication is to soften the rigid stories we hold about them, making room for empathy and forgiveness. Even suffering itself takes on a new shape under this perspective. We often believe that pain defines us, that hardship is an unalterable mark on our identity. Yet if the self is a fabrication, then the meaning we attach to suffering is also constructed. This does not erase the reality of pain, but it does suggest that its significance is more malleable than we assume. By reinterpreting suffering as part of the greater tapestry of illusion, we can reduce its grip on our minds. The pain may not vanish, but its power to dictate the narrative of our lives begins to wane. Schopenhauer himself found solace in art, music, and contemplation, modes of being that transcend the restless will and allow us to glimpse something beyond fabrication, however briefly. The practical implication, then, is not that one must reject all illusions and live in bare despair. Rather, it is to cultivate a double vision, to participate in the world's stories while remembering they are stories, to love while knowing love is framed by illusion, to strive while knowing striving cannot deliver ultimate fulfillment. This dual awareness transforms daily life into something almost sacred. The marketplace becomes not just a site of commerce, but a theater where human desires play out. Relationships become not just exchanges of affection, but encounters between dreamers who mistake their dreams for reality. To live with this perspective is to move through life awake, neither clinging blindly to illusions nor scorning them entirely. Art, meditation, and philosophy all serve as practices of integration. In art, we immerse ourselves in beauty while knowing it is crafted illusion, yet the experience uplifts us. In meditation, we observe thoughts and feelings rise and fall like waves, recognizing their fabricated nature without being enslaved by them. In philosophy, we train the mind to pierce through comforting appearances, allowing us to act with greater clarity and compassion. These practices do not dissolve the veil, but they allow us to walk closer to its edge, touching the threads of illusion without being fully entangled. What emerges, finally, is not a call to nihilism, but to a gentler, wiser engagement with the human condition. If everything we believe is fabrication, then we are free to hold our beliefs with both sincerity and humility, to live passionately without mistaking passion for permanence. Schopenhauer's message, unsettling though it is, becomes an invitation to awaken within the dream, to treat the illusions not as chains but as symbols pointing beyond themselves. If everything you believe is a fabrication, then the question that follows is not simply, what is true, but rather, how will you live knowing this? Schopenhauer did not offer easy answers, nor did he provide comforting myths to replace the illusions he dismantled. Instead, he left us with the sober recognition that the world of appearances is both our prison and our playground, both our delusion and our salvation. The task, then, is not to escape the dream entirely, for that would be impossible while we breathe, but to awaken within it, to move with greater clarity, compassion, and courage through a world built of shifting veils. The transformative power of this realization is profound. When you understand that the beliefs you clutch so tightly about identity, purpose, happiness, love, and even truth itself are fabrications, you are no longer bound to them with desperation. You can wear them like garments, necessary for the climate of existence, but not confused with the skin beneath. You can embrace roles, ideals, and hopes without mistaking them for unchanging absolutes. This softens the sharpness of disappointment and tempers the arrogance of certainty. You become, in a sense, lighter, less burdened by the weight of illusions mistaken for eternal realities. This shift does not diminish the beauty of life, it amplifies it. To see the world as fabrication is to see it as a masterpiece of imagination, like a dream spun by cosmic artistry. Just as a play gains poignancy when we know it is fleeting, so life gains depth when we recognize its impermanence. Love becomes more precious when we know it is shaped by illusions, not because it is false, but because it is fragile. Beauty becomes more radiant when we realize it is conjured by perception, not because it is unreal, but because it reveals the creative power of mind and will. Even suffering, reframed as part of the grand weave of illusion, becomes less a mark of doom and more a passage in a larger story whose meaning transcends any single chapter. To live with this awareness is to cultivate what might be called lucid existence. Just as in a lucid dream one awakens to the fact that one is dreaming and thus moves with greater freedom, in life one awakens to the knowledge that beliefs are fabrications and thus ceases to be entirely enslaved by them. This lucidity does not abolish the dream, but it transforms your role within it. You are no longer a helpless character swept blindly along, but a conscious participant, able to shape your response, able to approach others with tenderness, able to rest in the mystery without demanding final answers. The transformational call here is not toward withdrawal, though Schopenhauer himself leaned toward asceticism. It is toward presence. By recognizing the fabricated nature of our convictions, we are invited to step more fully into the immediacy of the moment. To listen not just to the stories we tell, but to the silence between them. To see not just the puppet show, but the strings, and beyond the strings the mysterious hand of will. To love, knowing it is framed by illusion, and thus to love more fiercely because of its fleetingness. To act, knowing our ideals are provisional, and thus to act with humility rather than dogmatism. This awareness is not meant to make you despair, but to awaken a deeper courage. For if all is fabrication, then there is no single narrative you must obey, no belief you cannot question, no identity you cannot shed. You are free, not in the shallow sense of doing whatever you please, but in the profound sense of living without mistaking the embroidery for the cloth. This is freedom of the spirit, a freedom that Schopenhauer's hidden message whispers to those willing to hear it. So now, as you reflect on the world you inhabit, the cathedral of appearances, the mirror maze of beliefs, the restless ocean of will, you are asked to choose how you will live. Will you cling to fabrications as though they were stone, or will you dance within them as though they were wind? Will you suffer endlessly under the weight of illusions mistaken for truth, or will you allow their shimmering unreality to liberate you into a gentler, wiser way of being? The invitation stands before you, awaken not by escaping the dream, but by seeing it for what it is. The world will not change its nature simply because you glimpse its hidden fabric. The veils will remain, the illusions will persist, the will continue to surge. But you will have changed. You will walk differently, love differently, suffer differently. And in that transformation lies the secret, the power to live fully within fabrication while no longer being deceived by it. This is the gift Schopenhauer leaves us, the hidden message about reality that turns despair into depth and illusion into illumination. Everything you believe is a fabrication, but in that recognition lies the possibility of freedom, and in freedom, the beginning of wisdom.